Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a proposed amendment which is being put forward by the chair of the Labour Movement for Europe, Stella Creasy, which will almost certainly fail, but which I think there should be a lot of campaign energy behind if we want to hasten the process of reversing the extreme Tory Brexit. So Creasy is to propose an amendment to the Budget Responsibility Bill. Labour have made a big deal of changing rules which will make sure their budget decisions are assessed for value for public money. There's going to be like a group set up to assess specifically that. It's all designed to demonstrate to the public that their taxes will be well spent. But the core of this Budget Responsibility Bill is to make sure that a Liz Truss fiscal event can never happen again. Because it means that any fiscally significant event has to be assessed by the Office of Budgetary Responsibility. But is this just a political device to give the impression of probity and to beat the Tories over the head with the Liz Truss bat again? Or will it make sure that the country's finances are being properly scrutinised for value? Because Stella Creasy's got an interesting idea. She wants to make sure that the liabilities from PFI deals for schools and hospitals are assessed. Now, I strongly suspect Labour will not want to, the Labour leadership will not want to touch this with a 10-foot barge pole, but I'll come on to that at the end. But what most interests me is the idea that trade deals should also fall under this idea, including our trade and cooperation deal with the EU. Because this is very much in line with my general views on the best way forward for Brexit. Because right now, as I've said before, I keep seeing a lot of commentators saying, oh, Starmer has the option of just joining the single market. No, he doesn't, for multiple reasons. In fact, his actual proposals regarding better access to the single market are considered by some of these commentators at the same time both unambitious and very difficult to achieve. Which is like a jarring concept. It's like, well, by definition, if something is unambitious, it means it's easy to achieve. And if something is very difficult to achieve, and with your best efforts you may fail, by definition it's ambitious. This contradiction within anti-Brexit circles is making the campaign to rejoin the EU, which, let's be honest, has never been effectively organised, run in circles itself. My argument is for the public to be under no illusions to what Brexit is costing us. I think part of the problem is a lot of people that are tuned into Brexit issues think, well, we know this and we know this and we know this. It's like, yeah, but the public don't. The EU are not interested in entertaining any notion of a huge change to trading arrangements right now. So it doesn't matter what the UK government wants in those terms. But in time, as this changes, and it will change, it changes as early as next year, in fact, we need to be politically ready here. And to be ready, we need the public to know what we know. It's all right, I'll say, but we already know this. It's like, yes, but most people don't. We need people to recognise not just that Brexit was a bad idea. That's concept's already firmly established. We know that if we turn the clock back, people would not vote for Brexit. We get that, but it's too late. That's in the past. What we need is for that same public to realise that continuing to being outside is more painful than the risk of another toxic debate about going back. That's the problem we have to solve. And one big step towards solving it would be to make the public aware of just how much Brexit is costing us. Plenty of us point out, that for all this talk of budget holes, oh, you've got a £22 billion budget hole, very good. The hole left by the trade barriers resulting from being outside the single market alone are even bigger than that. If we were inside the single market, then you wouldn't be worrying about that budget hole, right? We can say that till the cows come home. But where's the official analysis? Doesn't exist. The previous government refused to allow the Treasury to carry one out. The Labour government should really be ordering the Treasury to do this now, but there's no sign of them doing so. And almost nobody's asking them to. The Conservatives battered away those suggestions years ago, but Labour insists that there be independent oversight over the country's finances in order that a Liz Truss event can never happen again. So they would find it more difficult, would they not, to justify concealing the economic impact of Brexit? Because if you refuse to order a review, then you're concealing it. But almost nobody's asking for this. I think Steve Bray's asked the question since Labour came to power, to be fair. He didn't get an answer. But if the question were asked by a lot more people, a lot more regularly, then maybe there would have to be an answer. And this amendment is Stella Creasy's way of sort of asking the question. The idea of the Budget Responsibility Bill, as I said, is that any what they call fiscally significant event has to be assessed by the OBR. And fiscally significant is defined as anything which costs the equivalent of 1% of GDP. Although quite how it will be known if something's going to cost 1% of GDP without the analysis, I don't know. But I assume there's some way of doing that. But the idea of this amendment is that it argues that, look, trade deals in any one particular year may not be worth that. But over the course of time, they will be more fiscally significant than something that in 1 year has a very high cost and is covered by it. So it should be assessed by the OBR in the same way. Now, there would be nothing retrospective in this action, I suspect. So I don't think it would force the actual economic impact assessment of leaving the single market. So I do think we want that separately as well, as far as I can tell anyway. But as Labour want to improve our trade deal with the EU, it would mean that any revisions or proposed revisions would have to be assessed. And that assessment may well have to consider the realities of being outside the single market at least. It would certainly mean official analyses of the costs of Brexit policies. And on its own, I don't think it would be as useful as that full economic impact assessment of being outside the single market. But although I would prefer another one with the customs union as well. But it would be much more information than we've got now. And it would be official. And it would have to be reported on. And then, the public would become aware of it. Like I say, I think this amendment's likely to fail. But I do think it's worth pushing. It's hard to see how we make real progress in diffusing the toxicity of the Brexit debate, which is what a lot of voters fear, without finally having the facts at our disposal. Because Brexit fed on lies and cover-up. So countering it doesn't really work by doing more of the same. And finally, just my thoughts on the amendment regarding those PFI costs for schools and hospitals. It's sort of a politically tricky one. Because on the one hand, PFI was one of the big objections I had to how the last Labour government conducted itself. It was effectively a way of getting private investment into education and healthcare. But those schools and hospitals are still repaying those debts now. And with those shrinking budgets, it's now a major strain on those budgets, which has meant cuts. And it's like, they're having to prioritise paying this thing off than like hiring staff. So my attitude is simple. If a private investment group realises that it can make a significant return on investing in school or hospital, in a PFI project, then the state could just invest all of the money needed and get that same return in time, or more sensibly, reduce the costs in the long term to those schools and hospitals. Either way, it makes more sense economically for the country, for the state to invest in its own public services, in its own infrastructure. However, on the flip side, I know how that works. It means much more borrowing because the money just isn't there. So you have to borrow quite heavily. The Tories and their client media will not talk about the fact, oh yeah, but in 10 years' time it'll have paid for itself. They will say, oh, you've got this massive debt mountain. Debt's out of control. Oh, it's ridiculous now. Labour would lose the next election. The Tories would then undermine all that investment. So the debt would remain. It wouldn't get paid off because the GDP growth to cover it would never materialise, just like it didn't since 2010. So it's one of these areas where I recognise it's the wrong policy economically, but I also know that politically there's no real choice. Massive borrowing programmes are going to cost you the election. That's all there is to it. And then that investment stops and is in fact scaled back because the Tories will work out how to sell it. So it's a choice between private investment or no investment at times. So although I personally would support this aspect of Creasy's proposals as well, I would certainly vote for it. Because I think the public should know what all policies are going to cost in the short and long term. And you could also think, well, maybe if we do this, we can nudge the public perception onto the idea that, well, because this is what I would like to say to the public. If a private group, an investment group, sees a profit in it, then why wouldn't the state just stump up the money, even if it's borrowing for it? Because it'll pay for itself. But no one suggests this to people. And maybe something like that could get that discussion going. But I also think it'd be very politically risky because it might not. And if it doesn't, because I don't know what the real benefits would be, because it potentially boxes you in to actually reducing overall levels of investment rather than raising the amount borrowed. But formal assessments of Brexit deals, that would produce definite payoffs. There's no risk there. It would get people talking about the costs of Brexit in a way that nobody's really doing. And no matter how the public take to it, it's certainly not going to cause the government to want to scale back moves to closer relationships with the EU, trading relationships specifically. Whereas, you know, shining a spotlight on PFI payments could go one of two ways. But this, you know, shining a spotlight on the cost of Brexit can either do nothing at all. It can either get the public going, oh, well, we've left, so leave it, which is no change from now. Or it can get them going, oh, yeah, this is much more costly than we thought. Yeah, we should move more quickly. One or the two. You know, I mean, we can point to independent analysis. We could go, oh, you know, the economy is shrunk by, or the economy is 4 or 5% smaller than it otherwise would be. We can point to this analysis and this report. But the media will dismiss it. Oh, it's just that group there full of wokish, you see. It's all flawed. They cannot so easily dismiss an analysis effectively ordered by Parliament. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.